That Henry J is designed and engineered to stand up under the roughest punishment. Even this concrete pretzel bender can't twist the body or throw it out of line. The Henry J's doors fit smoothly. Not a bolt out of line, not a joint out of kilter.
Do you remember the time when America had just stepped out of World War II and rushed to believe that everything could become the future? And in that euphoria, they stuffed an entire generation into cars that looked like rolling bathtubs, UFOs parked in the wrong lot, or tiny sedans that rattled like carnival rides. That was the 1950s, the era when Detroit believed the stranger, the flashier, the more over-the-top, the better it proved American power. These dazzling, oversized, and sometimes downright ridiculous machines once roared across the highways, making the whole world gasp and laugh at the same time. And today, we're going to revisit 30 of the silliest cars of that era. Designs you may have never seen in person, but once you do, you'll never forget them. 30. 1950. Nash Air Flight, the rolling bathtub. To kick off the list, we meet one of the quirkiest designs of the 50s, the car Americans jokingly called the bathtub on wheels. Forget the idea that a car was just 4 wheels and a steering wheel, because the 1950 Nash Air Flight would make you rub your eyes. After the war, Nash Motors decided not to follow Detroit's boxy mold, but instead launched a streamlined body, rounded from nose to tail. Standing on the street looking at it, many people blurted out, "Hey, is that a bathtub driving by?" And thus the nickname bathtub car was born. The most unique feature was the front seat, which could fold flat into a double bed. It sounded romantic. Young couples could lie down and rest during long road trips. Kids could curl up listening to the baseball game on the radio. Nash even advertised it with a mosquito net, as if turning the car into a mobile bedroom right on the highway. But the reality of driving it was far less charming. The 6-cylinder engine with 82 115 horsepower had to haul a heavy body, making acceleration sluggish and hill climbing exhausting. Many owners recalled the feeling as like rowing a boat through mud. Today, the very car once ridiculed is now hunted at classic car auctions, sometimes going for tens of thousands of dollars. Silly as it was, the Air Flight reminds us of an America that believed the future should be round, shiny, and full of comfort. 29. 1950 Nash Rambler, the family car that wobbled like a trolley. But if the Air Flight was too bulky, the Rambler was so tiny it seemed swallowed up among the street's dinosaurs. In an era when Americans were in love with sedans nearly 20 feet long, the 1950 Nash Rambler appeared like a dwarf among giants. It was one of the first compact cars with a rounded body and wraparound curved glass that looked fairly modern. Nash's idea was bold. Small families need a tidy, economical car too. It sounded sensible, but in practice, it was comical. The 6-cylinder engine had just 82 horsepower, so weak that many owners recalled how the whole family held their breath going uphill. Its light weight and low body made it sway dramatically around corners, as if you were riding a mini roller coaster. Many nicknamed the Rambler the wobbly car for that floaty sensation. Even so, in the memory of many Americans, the Rambler was endearing. Kids loved squeezing into the tiny back seat, huddled together, listening to AM radio baseball games. Mothers remembered it as the car easy to park in front of the supermarket, while fathers shook their heads over constant repairs to the transmission or electrical system. Today, the Nash Rambler is often mocked for being too small in a world of giant sedans. But for many American families of the early 50s, it was their very first car, a simple but unforgettable memory. 28. 1950. Kaiser Frazer, Henry J., saving taken too far. Next up is the Henry J, a car so cheap that buyers had to accept grabbing their luggage by folding down the back seat. When Kaiser Frazer introduced the Henry J in 1950, the idea sounded noble. Build a car as cheap as a used one so that any working family could afford it. The starting price was only whopping $299, a few hundred less than Ford or Chevrolet, about the equivalent of a couple months' wages for a steel worker in Pittsburgh or a rubber hand in Akron. But to hit that price, the company cut corners in almost unbelievable ways. There was no trunk lid. To get your suitcase, you folded the rear seat forward. No glove box, no armrests, and the cheapest version didn't even have roll-down windows, just fixed panes of glass. For Midwestern families sweating through humid summers, sitting in a Henry J was like a free steam bath. No wonder Americans nicknamed it the poor man's toy car. In industrial towns like Detroit or Gary, the sight of a Henry J rattling into the church parking lot on Sunday became familiar. Cramped and stripped down as it was, it still meant that family had caught up with the American car dream. For those who rode in it, the Henry J carried memories of trips to Lake Michigan. The whole family squeezed into the tiny cabin. Kids sitting on the floor clutching wax paper wrapped sandwiches. It wasn't classy, it wasn't powerful, but it was a humble bridge that brought the working class into the four-wheeled age. A clumsy but endearing memory of early 1950s America. 27th, 1951. Crossley Hotshot, a toy-sized sports car. Here comes the Crossley Hotshot, a car no bigger than a toy, yet bold enough to charge down Route 66 as if leading the race. If there were an Oscar for the smallest car ever to dare the American highway, the 1951 Crossley Hotshot would surely be nominated. Less than 10 feet long, weighing only 2,100 pounds, about the size of an industrial washing machine, the Hotshot debuted with bold claims, America's first post-war sports car. But once behind the wheel, it felt like a prank. No doors, no roof, no real windshield, and to get in, you literally had to climb over the side. Its 724cc engine made just 26.5 horsepower. Barely enough, but somehow it could push the car to 70 miles per hour, just fast enough to make drivers break out in a cold sweat on Route 66. And yet, the Hotshot still brought sweet memories. In small towns across Ohio or Indiana, people recall summer nights when young couples drove topless Hotshots to get 5-cent ice cream cones, hair flying wild in the wind. Children loved it because it looked exactly like a blown-up toy, the neighborhood's brave little frog on wheels. Though it quickly rusted away and vanished after a few years, the Hotshot is remembered as a brave but oddball effort. Proof that sometimes Americans loved awkward little things, simply because they made them laugh and feel lighthearted. 26. 1952. Allstate Sears, a car ordered from a catalog. If you could order a refrigerator, a washing machine, even a prefab house from a Sears catalog, then why not a car? That was the bold and slightly absurd idea of Sears in 1952. They rolled out the Allstate, basically a rebadged Kaiser Frazer. Henry J. slapped with the Allstate name familiar to millions of American families through insurance policies. On paper, it was tempting. Flip through the thick catalog, pick your Allstate model, fill out an order form, and a few weeks later the car would be waiting at your nearest Sears outlet. But the as easy as buying a fridge idea quickly showed its flaws. The Allstate carried all the Henry J's shortcomings. Weak engine, bare-bones interior, uninspired looks. Worse, Sears had no real service network, leaving owners scrambling to find mechanics willing to fix it. In many American memories, the Allstate stands as proof of a time when everything seemed buyable through the catalog. One former customer remembered, "Mom bought dresses from Sears, while Dad fumed because the Allstate could barely crawl on the highway." A commercial flop, yes, but the Allstate still leaves behind a cheerful note in the nostalgic tune of mid-century America, a time when the country was bold enough to try almost anything, no matter how impractical. 25. 1953. Willys Aero, the awkward, outdated sedan. When people think of Willys, they think of the Jeep, the rugged little workhorse that helped American soldiers win the war. But in 1953, Willys tried its hand at the family sedan with the Aero and went off course. The Aero looked mild and rounded, with a sloping roofline, but it felt outdated. While Chevrolets and Fords glittered with chrome, the Aero looked like a kid wearing last year's suit to the school dance. Its 91 horsepower six-cylinder was enough to get you to the A&P, but climbing the Appalachians left drivers sweating bullets. Priced around $1745, it wasn't much cheaper than a roomy Chevy, leaving buyers wondering why they should bother. Yet in the memories of many families, the Aero was their very first car. People remember kids crammed across the back seat, clutching 25-cent ice cream cartons, while parents chatted about mortgage payments in Levittown. The Aero never shined as a star, but it still lingers in family photos, an awkward but familiar piece of the post-war American dream. 24. 1953. Hudson Jet, a beige box on four wheels. After the glory of the Hudson Hornet, the company decided to try the compact market with the Hudson Jet. But instead of a stylish little car, they produced something that looked like a beige cardboard box on wheels. In an era when Americans loved sleek curves and soaring tail fins, the Jet was completely out of place. Under the hood, the Jet had a six-cylinder with 104 horsepower, not terrible. The problem was the price. A 1953 Jet cost between $1,745 and $2,174, nearly the same as a Chevrolet Bel Air, bigger, flashier, and more desirable. Buyers asked, for this money, why buy a tiny box? And they walked away. Though it failed quickly and was killed off by AMC, the Jet lingers in memories of working-class families in Ohio and Michigan. On Sundays, a rattling Jet carried the whole family to church. Kids squeezed in back with wax paper sandwiches. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't classy, but it was the little car of a big dream, a simple puzzle piece in America's childhood picture. 23. 1953 Kaiser Dragon, flashy fake alligator. Kaiser wanted to challenge Cadillac in the luxury market, so they rolled out the 1953 Kaiser Dragon. The name sounded fierce, but the interior made people laugh. Seats and dashboard covered in green vinyl printed to look like alligator skin. Instead of luxury, it looked like a cheap roadside bar. Priced at around $3,900, on par with Cadillac, the Dragon suffered badly in comparison. Who wanted to spend nearly $4,000, why just to sit in a plastic alligator? In church parking lots and outside movie theaters, the Dragon became a punchline. Kids pointed, adults whispered, who would buy that thing? Yet for the few families who did, it still carried memories of weekend drives and picnics. Gaudy and awkward, yes, but also a reminder of the time when Detroit believed that slapping shiny vinyl on anything was enough to call it luxury. 22. 1954. Dodge Fire Aero's concept, beautiful but useless. There was a time when Dodge teamed up with Italian design house Ghia to create the Fire Aero concept, a graceful convertible with flowing curves that made everyone gasp. It was so beautiful, it didn't even look American, more like a rolling sculpture straight out of Milan. But this kind of beauty was useless in Detroit. The Fire Aero was never mass-produced, because the cost would have pushed its price over $6,000, several times more than a Chevy Bel Air with all the comforts. Americans of that era admired it at shows, but when it came time to buy, they headed to their Ford or Plymouth dealers for something practical enough to haul groceries. For many who saw the Fire Arrow at auto exhibitions, it felt like a distant dream, dazzling, enchanting, but forever out of reach. They called it the beauty meant only for the living room wall. Foolish because it never served everyday life. 1954. Hudson Italia, the Italian beauty left behind. After the Hornet's success, Hudson decided to go upscale, teaming with Carrozzeria Touring of Italy to create the oddball coupe called the Hudson Italia. With its aluminum curves, narrow doors, and sloping roof, it looked more like a work of art misplaced in an American showroom. But the price was the real shock, $4,800, nearly twice the cost of a Cadillac Series 62. For that kind of money, a family could buy a small house in the suburbs. Who would spend it on a pretty but impractical car? Americans still remember crowding around the Italia at fairs, children wide-eyed, adults murmuring with awe. But as they left, they shook their heads. Beautiful, but not for me. Only 26 were ever built, quickly becoming collector's items. The Italia was a foolish dream, glowing and alluring, but not remotely suited for America's wide, practical, value-driven roads. 1954. Packard Panther, Daytona, a luxury concept built only 4 times. Do you remember the 1950s, when people flocked to auto shows just to marvel at glittering concept cars everyone knew would never hit the road? The Packard Panther Daytona was one of them. Unveiled in 1954, the Panther Daytona was Packard's desperate attempt to prove they still had creative spark. With a fiberglass body lighter than steel, a long tail, and low-slung lines, it promised a luxury sports future Packard had never dared attempt. Only 4 were ever built, each one a rolling sculpture displayed at shows in Chicago, New York, and state fairs. But gorgeous as it was, the Panther Daytona couldn't save Packard. With a projected price around $10,000, triple the cost of a Cadillac Eldorado, it was far beyond middle-class reach. And when people left the exhibition halls, they still drove home in Chevys, Fords, or Oldsmobiles. Today, those who saw it remember the overwhelming feeling, like a flash of light before the flame went out. They called it foolish for being beautiful, but useless. Yet in memory, it was Packard's tragic final flutter, a brand once revered. 1955. Packard Clipper, a luxury car. That fell flat by the mid-50s. Packard, once a symbol of elegance, introduced the Clipper, hoping to broaden its customer base. But instead of excitement, it sparked confusion. Its design was too safe. Boxy body, gentle lines, a chrome grille with no drama. While Cadillac, Lincoln, and Chrysler exploded with tail fins, sexy curves, and blazing chrome, the Clipper looked like a gray-suited gentleman at a cocktail party. Inside, it had fabric seats, a 2-spoke wheel, and a V8 that looked good on paper. But the driving experience was dismissed as average, never special. Priced between $2,800 and $3,200, it sat in no man's land. Too expensive for the middle class, not glamorous enough for the elite. Americans remember the Clipper not for what it did well, but for being forgettable. Families still drove them to Sunday church in small towns, but memories of it come with a sigh. Packard was once great, and now this? 1955 Dodge La Femme, a pink car with a purse. If there were an award for the quirkiest marketing idea, Dodge La Femme would win. Launched in 1955, it was the first car designed just for women, at least according to the marketing men of the day. Painted pink and white, trimmed with floral upholstery, and sold with a matching accessory kit. Purse, gloves, raincoat, and hat, all in pink. The problem was that American women in the 1950s didn't need a purse with their car. They needed something practical, easy to drive, roomy enough for family outings and school runs. At over $2,500, La Femme was hardly cheap, and boxing women into a special car was seen as condescending. Today, people recall La Femme with a smirk. Did anyone actually buy it for grocery runs? Very few. But that sugary pink car remains a symbol of a time when Detroit was naive about understanding women drivers. 17. 1955 DeSoto Fireflight, chrome overload. Do you remember when American cars were drenched in chrome, with soaring tail fins, and a race to make everything bigger, brighter? The 1955 DeSoto Fireflight was the perfect example. A long body with thick chrome trim from nose to tail, topped by gigantic fins that seemed to stretch toward the sky. By day, it blinded you. By night, it reflected neon signs like a rolling mirror. Inside, the Fireflight had huge dials, leather-covered sofa seats, and a built-in radio. On paper, its 200 horsepower V8 was powerful, but its heavy body and flashy build made it sluggish and thirsty. Priced from $3,100, about the cost of a year at a top private college, it was out of reach for many families. Americans remembered it as the giant nickel car, showing up in parade photos or parked outside movie theaters, glittering but awkward. 16. 1956. Studebaker Golden Hawk, a sports car dressed like a dinosaur. In 1956, Studebaker launched the Golden Hawk, a coupe they hoped would rescue the brand from being overshadowed by Detroit's Big Three. Under the hood was a Packard-built 352 cubic inch V8, delivering 275 horsepower, impressive for the day. On paper, it could compete with Thunderbird or Corvette. The problem was its looks. The Golden Hawk was a jumble of details: a long needle nose, boxy body, chopped roof, and stubby fins stuck on as an afterthought. It looked like a coupe, wearing too many accessories, stopping passers-by not with admiration, but with puzzlement. Priced near $3,000, the cost of a fully loaded Chevy Bel Air, many buyers simply walked away. In memory, the Golden Hawk often belonged to small-town youths who wanted to stand out, but instead looked odd. People mocked it as bulky and overdone, yet anyone who saw one remembers it. An outsider, awkward but unforgettable, in the history of American cars. 15. 1956. Dodge Adventurer, fast only in ads. The name Adventurer already sounded bold. A car for thrill seekers and speed lovers. Dodge gave it a 320 cubic inch Hemi with over 300 horsepower, plus flashy looks, two-tone body, gleaming chrome, a grille that looked like a wide metallic smile. On the show floor, the Adventurer radiated pride, but on the street, reality wasn't so sweet. Its soft suspension made it wallow like a boat. The brakes were weak, and it was simply too heavy. Buyers expected a true sports car, but got something closer to a grocery-getting sedan. At over $3,400, Corvette offered more speed for less money. Americans remember the Adventurer with a chuckle. Looked fast, drove slow. Though disappointing, it still captures an era when Detroit never stopped dreaming. And in its own way, it carried a spirit that was very American. Promise big, then leave behind stories people still tell decades later. 14. 1957. Mercury Turnpike Cruiser, a UFO with antennas. When the new interstate highways stretched across America, Mercury wanted to mark the era with a car of the future. Enter the Turnpike Cruiser, which looked like it rolled out of a sci-fi movie. The wildest detail was a pair of towering antennas, like deer antlers, plus little roof windows that slid open. Inside was just as strange. A steering wheel with radio controls built in, seats as wide as living room sofas. Ads bragged it was the car of the new highway. In reality, it was heavy and gas-hungry. At nearly $3,050, people asked, why not buy a Cadillac? Americans laughed, calling it a UFO parked at Walmart. Still, for those who rode in a turnpike cruiser, it was unforgettable. Kids loved peeking out the little roof windows, and parents boasted to neighbors that they drove a technology car. 13. 1957. Lincoln Premier, a 6-meter land yacht. Cadillac was the luxury king of the 50s. Lincoln struck back with the 1957 Premier, declaring, "We can be just as grand." And they meant it by turning the car into a floating ship. At nearly 20 feet long and weighing over 2 tons, the Premier gleamed with enough chrome to blind a neighborhood, while the interior felt like a living room with leather sofas, air conditioning, and a radio. The problem was driving it. Steering felt like wrestling a barge, and parking was a sweaty ordeal. But truth be told, pulling into a Saturday night drive-in with the Premier packed full, kids munching popcorn, parents tuning Perry Como on the radio, turned its clumsy bulk into pride. Hard to handle, thirsty for gas, but a symbol of the American belief that bigger is better. 12. 1957. Ford Skyliner retractable, the first hardtop convertible. In 1957, Ford wanted to leave Americans speechless, and they did with the Skyliner retractable, the first mass-produced hardtop convertible. At the touch of a button, 7 electric motors and over 600 feet of wiring sprang to life, folding the roof neatly into the trunk. At fairs and exhibitions, crowds erupted in applause. Children cheered, as if watching a circus act. But bringing it home was another matter. The folding top ate nearly the whole trunk, leaving no room for picnic baskets. Its complex system often broke, with repairs costly. People soon called the Skyliner more a show car than a daily driver. Yet in memory, it still shines. Anyone who saw the roof's magical disappearing act remembers the thrill of America leading the world, even if the repair bills later soured the joy. 11. 1958. Chevrolet Yeoman, a boxy Lego brick. While other Chevys sparkled with chrome and soaring fins, the 1958 Yeoman wagon rolled out, looking like a gray brick on wheels. Chevrolet aimed it at young suburban families with a no-frills station wagon, stripping away the flash. No glittering trim, no sweeping curves, just square edges like a Lego block. Americans quickly dismissed it as plain and sluggish. But in Levittown and Lakewood, the Yeoman became part of daily life, hauling glass milk bottles from A&P, stuffed with boxes of Kellogg's cereal, then off to park picnics on weekends. Kids sat in the back, radio playing Elvis, windows down in the breeze. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fancy, but it was the first car for thousands of rising middle-class families. And in memory, the Yeoman lives on as a humble ticket into the suburban American dream. 10. 1958. Buick Limited, the chrome-plated ship of the highway. In 1958, America was living in a mix of plenty and worry. Suburbs sprouted everywhere. Drive-in theaters were packed with families. Yet a mild recession had folks tightening belts. And still, Buick rolled out the Limited, a car nearly 19 feet long, close to 5,000 pounds, smothered in chrome from end to end. On the boulevard, the Limited was like a silver-plated ship gliding past. Americans called it the Chrome Ship because whenever the car passed under sunlight, whole blocks squinted from the glare. Inside, it was pure suburban living room, leather sofa seats, Elvis crooning on the radio, air conditioning humming away. But real life was harsher. The Limited drank gas like a family devouring hamburgers at a brand new McDonald's. At nearly $5,000, it was a burden during shaky times. Americans laughed at its foolish excess, but never forgot the sight of one gliding past the A&P parking lot, turning every head. An extravagant mistake, yet a perfect reflection of 1950s America's bigger, flashier spirit. 9. 1958. Lincoln Continental Mark III, the suburban fortress. As middle-class families moved into new suburbs like Levittown, Lincoln launched the Continental Mark III, a massive sedan nearly 20 feet long, 2.3 tons, and a starting price of $6,000. While ordinary people bought Chevys or Fords for commuting, the Mark III was a fortress on wheels for the bosses. Driving a Mark III down small-town streets was like piloting a tank. Turning corners was a nightmare. Parking at the mall meant taking 2 spaces. Yet its sheer size made it a status symbol. In Pittsburgh or Detroit, steel barons and bankers sat behind its wheel to declare, "I can buy a car worth an entire suburban home." People mocked it for being heavy and thirsty. But in memory, the Mark III represents an America unafraid, where wealth meant driving a car bigger than your street. 8. 1958. Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz, the mobile stage of the American dream. By the late 1950s, with Elvis ruling the airwaves and drive-ins hosting teenage dates, Cadillac unveiled the 1958 Eldorado Biarritz, a car that turned every street into a stage. Towering tail fins like shark fins, chrome everywhere, gold-plated trim sparkling. Price tag? Nearly $7,500, enough to buy a small suburban house. Americans called it the show-off car. And truly, the Biarritz looked best parked in front of a luxury hotel, making passers-by stare. On the road, it was clumsy, heavy, and guzzled gas. Yet in memory, it belongs to vivid scenes. A glamorous couple pulling up to a Broadway theater, or a wealthy family stopping at Sunday church, fueling town gossip. Too flashy for its own good, yet the Biarritz embodied the American dream. The shinier you were, the more successful you seemed. 7. 1959 Cadillac Eldorado. Brougham, the perfume-spraying car. Did you know there was once an American car sold with its own perfume atomizer and stainless steel cocktail tumblers? Not Rolls-Royce. It was the 1959 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham, one of the most expensive cars in America. Priced at $13,000, equal to a comfortable suburban house. Cadillac made the Brougham the ultimate luxury symbol. Power doors, leather everywhere, and accessories that turned it into a rolling minibar. But that extravagance became its curse. It was heavy, complicated, and broke down so often owners kept sending it for repairs. Only 99 were built before disappearing into legend. Still, the Brougham is remembered as the dream Cadillac almost nobody could own. Americans think of it as a monument of excess, dazzling to the point of absurdity. Foolish, yes, but also the high watermark of Cadillac's boast that if you were rich, your car had to be rich enough to spray perfume. 6. 1958. Edsel, Ford, the $250 million disaster. Few cars have been ridiculed nationwide on day one, but Ford's 1958 Edsel achieved that. Ford pitched Edsel as a brand in between, costlier than Ford, cheaper than Mercury or Lincoln, hoping to fill a market gap. But once it rolled out, everyone noticed the grille shaped like a toilet seat, chrome overload, push-button gear selectors that broke, and a price tag that wasn't as cheap as hoped. The result? A $250 million disaster, an astronomical sum in the 1950s. Americans mocked it, newspapers skewered it, and Edsel became shorthand for failure. And yet, in memory, the Edsel lingers as a kind of legend. Everyone saw it, laughed at it, and remembers it when telling stories of the 50s. Foolish? Yes, but unforgettable. 5. 1953. Chevrolet Corvette, a sports car. Weak as a toy. Today, Corvette is America's speed icon. but the first one in 1953 was dismissed as a glossy toy. Chevrolet introduced it to counter Europe's sports cars. Fiberglass body, eye-catching looks, convertible style. But under the hood was a blue flame six-cylinder with 150 horsepower, so weak that critics joked, pretty, but slower than the family sedan. At around $3,500, it wasn't cheap either, leaving buyers disappointed. They wanted a racer, but got a car fit for a county fair display. Still, the 1953 Corvette lives in American memory. Kids staring wide-eyed at its shiny body at exhibitions, dreaming of driving one someday. Foolish because it promised so much, but delivered so little, yet it became the shaky first step toward a true legend. 4. 1957. Dodge Swept-Side Pickup, a truck in costume. Have you ever seen a pickup truck dressed up like a sedan? That was the 1957 Dodge Swept-Side. Instead of keeping the rugged farm truck look, Dodge bolted shiny chrome tail fins from a station wagon onto the bed. The result? A truck that looked like it belonged on a fashion runway. Farmers in Iowa, or ranchers in Kansas, had no use for such flash. They wanted a truck to haul hay, lumber, or equipment. At $2,300, the Swept-Side was too pricey and too impractical in the mud. People mocked it as a cosplay truck, and sales limped along with only a few thousand made. Yet many still recall seeing Swept-Side sparkle at state fairs, admired but never loaded with cargo. A clumsy experiment, but one that added color to the 1950s. 3. 1959. Chevrolet El Camino, half car, half truck. The first El Camino in 1959 was like a child of two worlds. With the sleek body of a Chevy Impala but a truck bed stuck on the back, it tried to be both stylish and useful. In theory, it was two in one. In practice, it was neither. The bed was shallow, the ride too low to replace a real truck, and compared to a sedan, it lacked comfort. People said flat out, not strong enough for a truck, not comfortable enough for a car. At over $2,500, buyers wondered, why not just buy both? A sedan for family, a pickup for work. Still, the El Camino carved its place in memory, gleaming down Main Street on summer nights, parked by neon burger joints. More curiosity than practicality, its very foolishness made it unforgettable. 2. 1959. Plymouth Fury, the haunted legend. Have you ever heard of a car that was both a symbol of 50s flash and a horror story in American culture? That was the 1959 Plymouth Fury. Detroit's tailfin race was at its peak, and Fury was Plymouth's star. Over 17 feet long, razor-sharp fins, chrome glittering end to end. Just seeing one fly down the highway, you knew it was built to show off. Then came Stephen King's novel, Christine, 1983. Suddenly, the Fury wasn't just a car, it was a blood-red demon, driving itself, killing, terrifying generations. The story turned Plymouth Fury from a flashy icon into America's nightmare car. Today, spotting a Fury is rare, but if you do, people shiver remembering Christine's glowing headlights in the dark. The 1959 Fury wasn't just a car, it proved beauty can become an everlasting fear. 1. 1958. Servaval prototype, the Frankenstein of cars. Of all the oddities, this may be the strangest car ever built, the 1958 Servaval. Created by engineer Walter Jerome, it defied Detroit's obsession with chrome and flash. Servaval looked straight out of science fiction. A split body to absorb crashes, with the driver perched in a glass turret offering a 360-degree view. Genius on paper, shocking in reality. Americans dubbed it Frankenstein on wheels. People laughed seeing it on the street. It looked like nothing else. No one bought it, and the project quickly died. Yet here's the twist. Servaval's crazy ideas later became standard safety features. 3-point seat belts, side markers, crash-protected cabins. Though it never made it to market, Serval is remembered as a symbol of boldness. So strange it was mocked, yet decades ahead of its time. Mention Serval, and Americans still chuckle at its looks, while nodding at its legacy. The monster that helped invent modern car safety. And so we've traveled back to meet 30 of the silliest cars of the 1950s. Machines that once drew laughter, but perfectly reflected post-war America. Rich, showy, and full of wild dreams about the future. The funny thing is, cars once mocked are now hunted at auctions, fetching tens of thousands for those bathtubs on wheels or UFOs on tires. What about you? Have you ever seen one of these oddballs in person, or even thought about collecting one? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to join us for the next trip down memory lane.